I now turn to the questions that from the live stream that I did yesterday with Robert Barnes. And firstly, we had some what I suspect was a donation from Colbury, and I thank you for that. And next, a question or a comment, GDOR AWG2K2. Why don't you stream on friendly services only until Alex is allowed back? Because we are not going to give up our presence anywhere. We are determined to keep putting out our content, our message, our opinions, our views, our analysis everywhere that we can. We think that we owe it to our viewers to do that, and we will continue to do it so long as we are able. 824964105. I think you underestimate the resolve and sheer delusion of the modern left. The fortification that will take place in 2024 will be on a scale hard to imagine. I think 8249644105 that you are wrong in only one thing that you've said in that comment, which is about our own underestimation. That's to say Robert's and mine, and by the way Alex's too. We have no illusions about this. We do not underestimate them at all. Our entire program between myself and Robert, that entire live stream was on the contrary discussing the kind of things that these people might do as 2024 looms, and how dangerous and reckless they potentially might get. So there's no underestimation from us. Please don't think so. Stuart, how much does our position as global COP benefit us economically? I'm asking about trade deals, setting standards, etc. My answer, I'm going to give a very quick answer to that. I think that there are benefits. I think that the fact that the United States has the reserve currency, for example, does mean that the United States has been able to get raw materials cheaply. So let me give you one example. The fact that the dollar is rising against all other currencies means that the United States is, at this moment in time, buying oil more cheaply than some of its competitors are, because oil is priced in dollars. Most oil that's traded in the world up to this time is priced in dollars. So that is an advantage that the United States gets from this system. Now, my own view is that the US gained peak advantage from this system sometime around the early 1990s. It's been a declining advantage ever since, and I think that some time ago, sometime in the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s, the balance shifted. And in my view today, the burdens of the United States fulfilling this role of global COP are far greater than the benefits. They're expending US treasure and of course US energies around the world, and they are resulting in the atrophy of US institutions and in the US economic and above all industrial and science base. So this is, by the way, very typical of empires. It happened to the British Empire. The British benefited a lot initially from their empire. Then gradually the benefits became overtaken by the burdens, to the point where in the late 1890s, our colonial secretary, Joseph Chamberlain, actually referred to Britain as a weary Titan, exhausted by the burden Britain was carrying. And I think that is very much the situation in which the United States finds itself today. So Radix Verum just did 2 videos about inflation and recession. Leftists coping, saying temporary inflation is better than fascism. Laugh out loud. We will look them up, actually, Radix. They sound interesting. Olga Sementsova, how far has the US come with CBDC? Is it programmable? I'm not able to say. Now, this is a question which I'm going to pass on to Robert, and we'll see whether he's in a position to answer. I mean, I just don't know, is the short answer. Marco Sparco, will the Republicans use the power of the purse to stop the DOJ, FBI from being Biden's secret police? Well, I presume you mean, will they use their power if they gain control of the House of Representatives to rein in control of the DOJ, FBI? I think they might, up to a certain degree. Again, this is more a question for Robert than for me, but I think they may up to a certain point. But I think the primary tool the Republicans are going to use is their control of the Overwatch committees. And of course, they will use that control to launch investigations. Robert and I discussed that. But also, I think, to keep much more careful tabs on what these agencies, the DOJ, FBI, have been up to. And, you know, they can call witnesses, they can force the director, the Attorney General to come and give testimony. They can do lots of things of that kind. Now, of course, in the first 2 years of Trump's term, they faced massive stonewalling whenever they tried to do that with members of the bureaucracy. But at that point, the Republicans did not have a very secure majority, and the Democrats were expecting to take back control of Congress. If the Republicans win a landslide in the midterms on the scale that Robert expects, and about which, by the way, I think he is right, then that puts the Republicans in a much stronger position this time round than they were 6 years ago. So Gunnar Balderson and Buddy Job, I again assume you've made donations, for which thanks. Stan Lipman, the Nixon rule, a president collapses beyond repair when you drop to 30%. Yes, I agree. I mean, I have to say, I think with this, Robert gave this cascade of failures that we see with the administration's policies. And of course, a president himself who is deeply unconvincing for all the many reasons that we've discussed. He falls to that kind of level, as he is, then I think this presidency is now irretrievable. It is beyond retrieval. And I think the Democrats understand that. And that's why they may resort to these complicated mechanisms and intrigues that Robert was discussing at such length and in such an interesting way over the course of the program. Zukski, thank you, gentlemen. Fantastic stream. Alexander's new phrase for me, legally dubious equals dodgy. And then there's applause. And well, thank you for that. Kajan, Mario Draghi wants to resign. Thoughts? It has to be the beginning of the end of the Draghi system. This strange period in Italian politics when this establishment technocrat, this globalist technocrat, was installed as Prime Minister of Italy, and somehow the entire political class, including that part of the political class that appeared to be in rebellion against the rest of it, the part led by Salvini, closed ranks behind him. And I think that this is the beginning of the end, even if Draghi is able to drag on, pun intended, for a little longer. So we'll start to see much more political volatility in Italy over the next few months and years. And of course, all of this is happening at one and the same time as there are massive mounting economic pressures on Italy, with the rise in interest rates putting ever greater pressure on Italian debt. The ECB says it's got a plan for how to deal with that. We'll see what that plan is. We'll see what the Germans say about it. Anyway, we've got lots of uncertainty, instability on the horizon. And of course, there's now a strong political challenge from the right, the real right in Italy, the brothers of Italy, and of course they are opposed to the war. So it's interesting. Last but not least, of course, Draghi falling may be a precursor of the fall of other governments across the Eurozone. We shall see. Stuart, what caused the deep state dumbing down? Brain drain to the private sector? I think it's what Robert said. It became incestuous. They began to recruit people like themselves. That limited the pool of people they could draw upon. When you limit the pool in that kind of way, the quality inevitably falls. Because just as with genes, so with recruitment systems, you need a certain diversity of people and ideas in order to keep something dynamic. Trenton Paul, J. Edgar never left the building. That's essentially true. Nonetheless, as I said, he was a force. I mean, I can remember him just, and as I said, he was, sort of like a spider, actually, in the middle of Washington. And, you were aware of him. He was a very, very dangerous, in fact, in my opinion, rather sinister person, rather sinister man. But there was no doubt about his, intelligence and ability. And of course, he was there for a very, very long time. So he was highly experienced about the system. So there's no one like that. There's absolutely no one like that in the system today. Eric Larkin, thank you again for your donation. Ines Fad, has Barnes had a chance to look at the lost not stolen document just released by 8 Conservatives? No, I don't think he has, and I haven't, even if Robert has. So no doubt we will come to that in due course. Nitsovich, another, as I said, I suspect donation, for which thanks. Ram Kumar, how can we hold of Trump from announcing his 2024 run before midterms? Well, I'm not entirely sure what the question is, but we don't fully know what Trump intends to do. But personally, I would be surprised if he does not intend to stand for the presidency. I think Robert also would be surprised if he didn't stand for the presidency. And I'm also going to say this, I think he's right to keep it back until after the midterms. If he were to announce it now, might just conceivably harden up the Democrats in a few places by, solidifying Democrat support with the never Trumpers and all those sort of people. Whereas if he announces it after the midterms, he is surfing the wave. And it would be, if the Republicans win a landslide, surfing the wave, which will take him all the way to the White House. Or so it seems to me. Jerry Fairchild, any truth to the story that Egypt, Turkey and Saudi Arabia are joining BRICS? What I think they're going to be doing is applying to join BRICS. And I think it is true. I mean, we haven't had it fully confirmed. And of course, opinions and minds can change. But at the moment, I believe that is indeed the intention. Tim Otts, against the breakup of the US, but a new Trump archipelago nation may be the only way to counter the Clinton-Obama archipelago destruction of constitutional projections for all of us. Well, we don't, I think, very strongly. Why did we disagree with that at all? I don't think we should put all our faith or hopes on Trump. I think that there are a lot more people in the United States than just Donald Trump who care about the Constitution. So, let's bear that in mind. I mean, Trump is powerful because he has become, if you like, the receptacle for the beliefs and convictions of all of these people. But, we mustn't assume that it's only Trump. But certainly, I think the forces that Trump represents, I think you're basically right about that. Ninus, do you think the Republicans will replace Mitch McConnell as Senate leader with someone else? That's more a question for Robert than me. My guess is no, for what I can say. I think Mitch McConnell is very deeply embedded in the establishment of the Republican Party. The donors want him. The Senate, it's not going to be a complete change in the Senate. And Robert said that, the establishment, even if the Republicans win a landslide, the establishment will still have the majority in Congress. So I think that Mitch McConnell will still be there, whatever, even if there is a Republican landslide, even if the populist wing becomes stronger, and I think he'll still be the Republican Senate leader. Now, having said that, if there's a strong populist wing, both in the House and in the Senate, it'd be a lot more difficult for Mitch McConnell to manage. And I think that's not to be underestimated. Deepak M, please talk about RBI's latest news about trading in rupee ruble. It's official now, and that's another blow to Western currencies. No one is talking about it. It's official now. Yeah, I think we talked about it in the program. We said that it is in fact an enormous event, and of course we're going to see more and more as it. I think it's a precursor of more to come. Reza, truly a pleasure to listen to Mr. Barnes. I so completely agree. It's a huge pleasure to talk to Mr. Barnes as well, which is what we do on our live stream, and having the interaction from the community makes it better still. Deb G, Draghi's resignation has been denied, not voted in, and now not being allowed to resign. Indeed, the Italian president, who is a Europeanist and globalist to his fingertips, has told Draghi to stay. But of course the danger in that is that Draghi is going to find it more and more difficult to govern Italy. And that may not be a solution. That may, on the contrary, deepen and prolong the crisis. Snafu has given us the thumbs up. Lamont Stigler has sent something. I suspect it's a donation. And Maureen Heck has done the same. Tony Neves. Back in October 2020, when laptop first dropped, there was stuff coming from a separate source and interviews on CGTN or the other one, Gao Wengui's media, SUS. There's 3 laptops or more at least, one held. Now, I haven't seen anything about this in the Chinese media, so I'm not going to comment on that. But about the fact that there's more than one laptop, I think we all are well aware of that. I think this is looking actually very grim now. And if, of course, the Chinese have all this information, which I'm confident they do, and of course the Russians also have information, you can be sure that the Russians and the Chinese are comparing notes about this. Well, it looks even worse. Gasan Kao-chan, again, thank you for whatever you sent. I suspect it's a donation. Elena Diaz, what is the BRICS? Is it a free trade organization? Is it a kind of Schengen? Who will lead? What are the benefits? It's a grouping of friendly states, non-Western states. It's led by China, with Russia as a junior partner, and India as a somewhat detached partner, but an increasingly, I think, active one too. And I'm going to say straightforwardly, it is starting to look like the other side's alternative to the G7. In other words, it's bringing together all the most powerful countries and economies of the non-Western world. And they come together and they can work out and iron out their position, and that puts them in a position to take on the West. And You can see them coming out now with joint statements, joint policies, exactly as the G7 does, only I would say that they're a lot more coherent than those that the G7 comes up with. Beer and Flies, again, thank you for whatever you sent us, a donation again, I expect. Tim Otts, Tim OTS, Otts, Robert, is the New York PSA concerning a nuclear attack an indication of what the October surprise would be? I believe in New York. I don't think it is, actually. And again, I'm not talking for Robert here, and maybe that's a question directed to him, but I don't personally think it is. I think it's intended to crank up even further the current hysteria. Robert doesn't think that there's going to be a battle over Taiwan. I'm less sure. As I said, I think we could find ourselves drifting into one almost by mistake, if you wish. But I don't think that what's happened in New York is a sign of what is being planned in terms of an October surprise. I think it's just an attempt to keep the current level of hysteria high. Elena Diaz, do NATO have the mandate to declare war? Do the EU have the mandate to declare war? What happens if NATO countries go to war and some countries don't go along? Well, the short answer is neither NATO nor the EU have a mandate to declare war. Neither is a state or nation. Countries declare wars, associations, economic associations, and even alliances don't declare war in that kind of way. And the short answer is, if some members of NATO go to war and others don't, and if some members of the EU go to war and others don't, then these two associations start to break down and unravel. Something very close to that happened in the early 2000s over Iraq, when Germany and France refused to participate in the Iraq war. Now, there was a major pushback thereafter by the US, and the German and French leaders who resisted the Iraq war were shunted to one side and replaced by Atlanticists. I'm sorry to put it like that, but in my opinion, that's essentially what happened. And at the moment, you see a very high degree of cohesion within these two organizations. There are dissenters, like Hungarians, but they are on the margins. That may change. There's a major conflict. You might start to see some countries starting to peel away, in which case, as I said, the viability of these two associations, the one a military alliance, the other nominally an economic union, but in practice a kind of hybrid proto-superstate. I mean, they would at that point start to disintegrate. Reza, all the ones that said Assad must go have all gone, and Assad is still standing. All the ones that have said Putin must go, they're departing one after another. Very true. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, you know, when Putin became president of Russia, think who was around then. They've all gone. And I'm sure he'll outlast the present bunch as well. Think about what happened at the time when the Western powers announced their first round of sanctions against Russia in 2014. All the leaders who were involved in that decision have all gone. All of them. And I'm sure it will be true with the present bunch as well. Sparky, gold-backed petro-ruble rules. Yup. Sparky, US should join BRICS to solve its economic woes. You have a very, very good sense of humour. Thank you, Sparky. Paul, thank you for your donation. Tim Otts. Robert, what do you think of the possibility of a Republican National Reconciliation ticket of Trump and a moderate Democrat? Again, this is a question more for Robert, but I'm going to offer my own tuppence worth. I don't think it's going to happen. I think no Democrat, no moderate Democrat, no type of Democrat would enter into any kind of reconciliation ticket with Donald Trump. I think the country's far too polarized, and any Democrat who tried would be roasted by the other Democrats, and their political career would probably come to an end unless they took the decision to go wholesale to the other side and become a Democrat. Ninus has asked the same question about Mitch McConnell being replaced as Speaker. Actually, he wouldn't technically be Speaker, he would be Senate Leader. The Speaker of the Senate is the Vice President. But anyway, I doubt that he will be. What Robert thinks, well, as I said, we'll send these questions to him and we'll find out. Sparky, Joe Biden's literally the most able man in his administration. After listening to Janet Yellen and her really extraordinary oil price cap plan, I'm starting to wonder myself, actually. And I thought that Janet Yellen was one of the more level-headed people in the administration. So there it just goes to show. Mick Anderton, George Galloway, breaking news. The USA Embassy in Kiev has ordered its nationals in Ukraine to leave the country immediately. Now, I've seen a couple of references to this in alternative media, and on Telegram in particular. I've not seen it reported anywhere formal, so I'd like to see some more comprehensive information about this before I assume it to be true. And what does US nationals in Ukraine mean? Does it mean, for example, military advisors, technical staff, all of those people who are helping Ukraine? I doubt it, actually. David, capitalist profit, theft corrupts all things. Well, was it Proudhon, one of the founders of anarchism, who said that all property is theft? I think the United States is based on alternative principles, but certainly what you say is the left-wing tradition. Sam Whiskey, Biden is America's Neville Chamberlain. You know, I don't agree with that. I'm going to put aside his foreign policy. Neville Chamberlain was a disastrous foreign policy prime minister. He was an extremely able, very able, extremely capable manager. He ran a successful economic policy, and he played a big part, actually, in reorganizing Britain's rearmament drive, which proved very important when the Second World War got underway. So he was actually an extremely talented manager and administrator. And I think with the best will in the world, no one would say that about Joe. Life of Brian, is the far left push on the Democrats coming from the European old money NGOs that are derailing Europe? Well, it's part of that. I don't think it's the only part of that. I mean, there's plenty of money coming from all sorts of sources in the US itself. Well, I'm sure, the WEF would certainly prefer a Democrat administration at this time to a Republican administration. Any Republican administration. Sparky, with enough MAGA congressmen and senators elected in 2022, elect Trump Speaker. Have tandem Biden-Kamala impeachment, Trump president 2 years early. I dabbled with that idea. I'm not sure how practical it really is. I understand that there's no constitutional restriction that says that Trump has to be a member of the House in order to be Speaker. But I think that doing something like this might look somewhat illicit, even if it was consistent with the letter of the law. And I think that Trump himself would probably not want to become president in this way. I think he'd rather be elected by the people in a landslide in 2024. But that's my guess. Again, this is perhaps one for Robert to think about and mull over and comment. Ed Exley, thank you again for what you sent. Mojave Outcast, Hunter selfie with George Soros and 2 eyes. I'm not going to comment on that. Black tie, absent friend. Cassie, Mr. Barnes, what about Biden's EO on promoting access to voting March 21? They're not going to accept anything other than full control. Well, that is the big question, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's going to be very, very, it's going to be very dramatic. As we said at the end of the program, we do live in very interesting times, and all kinds of things which we never thought were possible might become so. Pig Sniper 28, if Kamala becomes president by succession rather than election, will that hurt the future prospects of a female president? I sincerely hope not, and I don't believe so. I think the overwhelming majority of Americans, except for a few people, would not say that simply because Kamala Harris was a disastrous president who became president in a completely strange way, unelected way. I don't think they would say that that means that women presidents are a bad idea. I'm sure that's not what the vast majority of Americans would think. Sparky, Pete Buttigieg is an establishment intel stooge. Well, Robert said that he was the deep state candidate. So there we go. IB, will the new Congress have better understanding of Russian politics? I think, again, Robert answered this question. In effect, he said that the Congress as a whole would still be establishment or deep state dominated, but there'd be a bigger, much bigger, much more critical, much more vocal populist faction that would be hostile to the war. So that's, I think that the way that would play out once the Congress is elected, that would be interesting to work out and see. NN, thank you for, I presume, as I said, for what you sent, and Edixley, again, thank you also. Sparky, Trump should check with the Duran before hiring. Oh, you should certainly check with Robert. I'm not sure I would be the right person. I mean, I don't think I have that detailed, granular knowledge of whom to pick in the US as to give that kind of advice. But, you know, I suspect Robert would be quite an interesting person to speak to on things like that. Tim Oates, what is your opinion on the US interest rate hikes being mainly an attack upon the euro dollar? Well, I think euro dollar, but on the euro at least. Tom Longo, my very good friend, thinks that this is an attempt by the Fed to smash the euro. I don't know that this is the intention, but it could turn out to be the result. I mean, the euro trading below parity to the dollar is astonishing, and it's going to have a big impact in Europe. It means that just as the Americans are now paying less, in effect, for their oil, the Europeans are paying more. So when you hear that the oil price has been falling over the last few days, do please bear in mind that the Europeans, because they have to spend more euros for each dollar, from their point of view, the fall in the price of oil has not been so much. For Americans, it's different. And Asmi06, breaking, Italian Prime Minister Draghi said he's going to resign. So much for Putin must go. Well, indeed, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Putin is there. Draghi, at the moment, we don't know whether he's coming or going. I suspect he doesn't himself. There we go. Please, Jen, thanks. We are going to keep fighting, just as you say. Pine Mamba 1212, thank you for what you sent. Cactus Ray, will a new Republican majority in Congress do something about the border crisis? I think they will have to. Now, what they can do, as they don't control the executive, I am not sure. But they can certainly hold inquiries, investigations, call in people. I would be astonished if they didn't push hard on this. And it's an area, of course, where the administration is very, very vulnerable. RDDR, who do you think will join BRICS? Well, Iran is joining. Apparently that's now baked in the cake. Argentina probably is joining. South Africa, highly likely Saudi Arabia, Turkey, perhaps Egypt, are going to apply to join. And I would have thought that the BRICS would be pretty keen to have all those countries join. So that's going to be, if it happens, a big development. Ryan Bourdoin, don't forget the other point with Biden able to veto. Governors must take individual action on state levels, especially election integrity. Key governorships in 2022 will set up 2024. I think that's absolutely correct. I think that is completely true. I think that the governorships, the gubernatorial races, are going to be in some ways as important as the congressional races will be. Again, Robert has the granular knowledge of this, which I don't. And we'll be passing on these questions to Robert, and we'll see what he says about those. Sparky, Kevin McCain is a Paul Ryan clone. I think he's exactly a clone. I mean, he said some very, very positive things about Trump and the big role Trump played in sustaining the position of the Republicans in the House, for example. So I don't think he's exactly a clone, but of course he's not a populist either. I think he's one of those people who likes to stay on the fence, which can often be a very awkward position to be on. Rocky Lux for RMB, what happened on election night 2020 when the broadcast stopped and there was a news blackout? Trump had won by electoral college. From my chair sitting in EU, it looked very suspicious, corrupt. I'm afraid if we just go into a detailed discussion of this, YouTube won't be happy, and I'm afraid we're not going to. I'm sorry. We discussed this many times in many programs at the time. All I will say is this: I personally deeply regret that the courts didn't come up with a proper, comprehensive judgment on that issue. But there we are. JB Wentworth, thank you for whatever you sent us. If it's a donation, thank you very much. Sparky, like prohibition, various dissimilar factions conspired towards a misguided goal. Now it's a borderless world run by a central authority, globalism. Well, indeed, there is some similarity to prohibition, but this is actually much worse than that, because you have different factions fighting to achieve what they say is the same goal. But it seems that they all detest and loathe each other at the same time. That's what makes it so like the Kremlin. I mean, the Kremlin was all about, building communism, expanding it across the world, except, as I said, within the Kremlin, it was power struggles almost continuously, all the time. Especially after Stalin's death, the Soviet Union never really found a way to have a stable government that was not subject to power struggles. Tatiana Carmichael, again, thank you for whatever you've sent us. Not intimidated, the DOJ is politicized, rogue, and committing crimes against American citizens with impunity. No Republicans in Congress are doing a thing to stop it. Well, they're not in the majority at the moment in either house. Perhaps when they gain the majority, they will act otherwise. Summer of 1970. Like the rethugs are going to do anything good domestically or globally. The duopoly must die. Well, I think that Robert has made this distinction between establishment Republicans and populist Republicans. So we'll see what the populist Republicans are able to do. Victoria Barnett, again, thank you. RDRD, does BRICS really want a stronger international order free from Western unipolarity and other partitions, or does it want its own sphere of influence? Well, I'm sure it wants both, is the short answer to that. Why are the two inconsistent? At large 47, again, thank you for your support. Etienne de Gaulle, wow, what a name. Related to Charles, perhaps? I'd be interested to know. Thanks anyway. Can't believe I wasn't already a member. Well, thank you for joining, and you're very welcome. Roman Vasiliev, thanks for super broadcast. Where is Gonzalo? Where he always is, in Kharkiv, doing his programs. And, you know, we're still, in close touch with him. Jeremiah R. Seems to me Fed is causing a global collapse of all paper currencies, emerging markets. This ignites massive inflation internally in each of those countries. This puts people under stress, causing uprisings. Maybe this is their intention. I don't think it's their intention. We come back to all the points that Robert was making about the incompetence and chaos and disorganization of the people who rule us. There isn't a master plan. These people just don't have the ability to carry out a master plan. They are doing what they do because it's what the rule book they're working from tells them. They're not really thinking this out because they aren't capable of thinking this out. Sparky, thanks for helping out. Well, there you go. Robert, thanks for helping out. Yep, and we all thank Robert. Joanna Orlovska, what are your thoughts on Draghi's resignation? I think I've discussed that. I think I provided a detailed answer to that already. Turmoil in Italy, turmoil in the Eurozone, perhaps a sign that other leaders, other Western leaders are now vulnerable as well. David S., thank you for your support. JM, phone leak is to help clear Biden from 2024. They know they need someone else. I think that's pretty likely. I think Robert thinks the same. Mojavi's outcast, the laptop and iCloud hasn't been mentioned at all in mainstream media. Yeah, it's still a huge amount of reticence on this issue. I wonder for how much longer. CSK4J, thank you for your support. John Zuccaro, love you guys. Viva Barnes and the Duran, please say hi to the bad boy Alex. He's actually a wonderful person. Banned from, well, we know whom. Any hope for Section 230 rollback? Thoughts on 2022 midterms and idiot rhinos? Best wishes to all. I think Section 230 rollback, I still think that's very unlikely. Myself, I think Robert thinks so too. As for what happens on the 2022 midterms, I think Robert's answered that question at length. Republican landslide, a stronger populist representation in Congress, both in the House and in the Senate, but overall, the establishment, the deep state, retaining its majority, but finding it increasingly difficult to retain control. Anyway, let's see. Enra, thank you for your support. Everett McLemore, thank you for your support. Catherine Smith, we were both wrong. Italy PM out before Germany. Scholz still next to fall. Well, first of all, Draghi has not yet gone. He's still there, so don't rush to conclusions too quickly. Scholz is the much more consequential leader. And I would say the position of the German government is increasingly precarious as winter closes in. Mr. Steve VC, thank you for your support. Angry Warhawk, will we definitely see an end to the petrodollar? Yes, I think the petrodollar is now in its last days. The petrodollar is not the same as the dollar as the reserve currency, but it is an important part of keeping the dollar as a reserve currency. So if the petrodollar ends because oil starts to be priced in other currencies, it will be the beginning of the end of the reserve currency status of the dollar. And I do think it is now in its final days. Orlando Santos, thank you for your support. Etienne de Gaulle, love seeing you on the Duran bonds. Jacob Dryson predicts another, pandemic worse than the previous one in the yearish. Any thoughts? I repeat what I believe. I think it's also Robert's view. It will be incredibly difficult. I think it will be politically all but impossible. I think it will be socially all but impossible to impose the same restrictions all over again. I think the general population, not just in the US but in Europe, will simply not accept it. Red Pill Scholar, curse of Zelensky strikes again. Draghi resigned. Indeed so. Blex, thank you for your support. Neboizia Bielobrik, thank you for your support. Eliana McKee, do you think US's constant provocations will get us involved in a direct war? The ship is sinking so fast that MIC may throw all caution to the wind. Well, Robert thinks that a war somewhere is a distinct possibility. He thinks Africa might be a good place. He's skeptical that it will be Taiwan. I'm afraid I think the Middle East is a distinct possibility. It seems to me that Biden, perhaps without quite understanding what he's done, has just given what looks to me dangerously like a blank check to Israel to attack Iran, in which case there's a very real risk that the US could get dragged in some ways. And as for the Pacific, I think that Robert is almost certainly right that the administration is not looking for a fight with China. But the Chinese are becoming deeply suspicious, and it's not impossible that there could be a fight in the Pacific, and it's not impossible that the US could get dragged in. We'll see. P. Binks, thank you for your support. Kalin Kulianu. Alexander, you said you don't believe another pandemic will take root. They are already planting the seeds for it now for the fall. Why do you believe they will fail with us again with lockdowns? The reason is what I said. I think there will be enormous amount, too much resistance from society. I think that trying to repeat the same thing all over again would result in too many public protests and too many people simply disobeying whatever rules were imposed on them, and of course massive numbers of legal challenges. Megawatt, thank you for your support. Claudie, I'm a huge fan of you both and watch you whenever I can in the middle of the day while I should be working. Laugh out loud. Thank you. And thank you very much for those very kind words, and very gratefully and warmly received. Verda Bill, thank you for your support. Majavi's Outcast, thank you for your support. Alcox, Cactus Ray, thank you for your support. Joshua Nikolai, have you gentlemen heard that Jimmy Dore may be running in 2024? Thoughts? Wow, quite a thing. Well, obviously, he can't be seriously expecting to be elected, but it will certainly be an interesting thing. It might introduce some, shall we say, useful debate on the left-wing side, because Jimmy Dore, let's be straightforward about it, is a true left-winger of the old school, the kind I used to know so well in Europe, in the United States, and it's a tradition which, to be straightforward about it, I greatly miss. Tricky Dicky, thank you for your support. Bauket Jan Duma, quote of the week: step 1, get inside fast. Step 2, stay inside. Step 3, stay tuned. Thanks. Dominique, national debt 130%, total debt 390%. President senile, Vice President inconsistent, Senate McConnell, House Pelosi, foreign policy war with Russia, China, domestic policy divide and rule. Still optimistic for the US? Dominique, all you say is true. All you say is true. I retain, I don't say optimism, but I retain hope. First of all, I think one always should. I mean, counsels of despair are very dangerous things. And one should always wish, I think, the best for any country. And I think the United States still retains great reserves and potential. But certainly all the points that you make are entirely valid ones. So we have 2 super chats here. Let's see, from Jennifer about Trump winning in 2016. 2020 and MAGA will win huge in November, and he'll win again in 2024. Democrat Party is DOA. They won't be able to cheat like last time. We are awake now. Yeah. NATO, and then from Clean Willy, any BRICS basket of currency that includes the RMB, the yuan, the Chinese currency, is a major problem. The Chinese are horrible manipulators of their currency, and they print money at a rate that makes the US dollar look tame. I think that's precisely why they're going for a basket of currencies rather than a simple reliance on the RMB. I always call it the RMB, by the way, rather than the yuan, because certainly the Chinese currency has those problems, but then it's backed by the world's biggest, by far the world's biggest industrial base, and China is of course the world's biggest trader in finished goods. But you need other currencies to make up for the weaknesses of the RMB, and of course the ruble is the currency of the world's biggest commodities exporter. India is a huge country, it's a massive market as well. And you also would have Brazil, major commodities or exporter as well, major industrial producer. And of course, if Saudi Arabia joins, well, the world's other biggest oil exporter, so you'd have 2 of the big 3 oil exporters. The big 3 are the US, Saudi Arabia and Russia. 2 of the world's big 3 would be part of this basket of currencies. It would begin to look very strong despite the very real problems of the Chinese currency that you say. Well, those are all the questions from the 2 live streams. Thank you hugely to all of you, our community, for your participation in those live streams. As I said, we will pass on some of those questions to Dima and to Robert to see whether they have any particular points of their own to make. And thank you again for joining us. And remember, you can support us by coming to our shop, buying all the amazing things you will find there, our magic mugs and all the rest. Robert showed his own. You can also go support us via Patreon and Subscribestar. And as I said at the start of the program, the outset of the program, please do remember to look us up on our other platforms. Locals, first and foremost, Rumble as well, SuperU, ODYSEE, our thriving Telegram channel. We've seen what can be done to us, what can be done to anybody. And if you want to be guaranteed to get our content, you can go to our other platforms and find us there. Thank you for joining me again, and for joining all of us here at the Duran, Gonzalo, Dima, Robert and me. Alex, as I said, is always there, full of energy, keeping things working, providing his own content, which you can find on our other platforms. And I look forward to seeing you all again, and have a very good day.